I'm Matt. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Conductive, and today I want to talk to you a bit about how we can take a humble technology, which is a paint, and we can get all the way to smart buildings. And that seems like quite a strange jump for a lot of people. But the way I want to do that, and the way that we've done that, is via a community and the projects that they've built. So let's start at the beginning. We make paint. It's very straightforward. It is an electrically conductive paint. If I gave you this jar, you would just think, whatever, it's a black paint. But in fact, when it's dry, it can conduct electricity. So a lot of you might not know this, but you're already interacting with conductive inks and paints every day. It's a field that's called printed electronics. So anyone that has a smartphone or a laptop, it's very likely that somewhere in that device, there is a piece of printed circuitry. The companies that are supplying to those other companies are like DuPont and Henkel. They form about a $400 million market in the US for conductive inks and paints. Typically, the applications are automotive and consumer electronics and some healthcare applications as well. But even though these companies already produce a lot of these materials, I don't think that they're very good at finding the true value, the true end value of the materials, because they're interested in iterative applications. And what I want to explain to you is that our open approach towards innovation has driven a ton of value because we've found things that DuPont and Henkel haven't been able to find, found applications for printed electronics that they didn't imagine. So to be totally explicit about what this special material is, it is a paint. So here you can see it being applied to this painted piece of wood. It's this thick, viscous material. When it's dry, it can conduct electricity. So you have there a battery and an LED, very straightforward. If you can think about it as a paintable wire, you kind of have the right mind frame for it. But the cool thing about the paint is that it, of course, has a lot more than just this simple property of conducting electricity. Its physical form means that it can work as a glue, you can spray it, you can stencil it, you can dip it, you can use it as a resistor, and you can use it as a sensor as well. So this is very exciting, right? You can basically do anything with this material, but that's also probably the most dangerous part about it. When we created this initially, everyone agreed, this is pretty cool, but none of us had any idea what to do with it, which should be totally disabling for a new business. But in fact, in the presence of the internet, it's a pretty powerful proposition. So what we were interested in doing is creating a community that would help us figure out what the technology is about. We think this is a pretty contemporary approach. We've sold a lot of product, we've sold a lot of paint to a community that's done all sorts of things. They've made buttons and switches and sensors, they've used it as a glue and used it as resistors, but the thing that they did that we didn't anticipate was they brought the technology to their area of expertise, and they found problems that we could never have anticipated. So we have engineers calling us and saying, you know what, I think this solves this hyper-specific problem that is really valuable to me. And we do that not by pitching in a kind of B2B pitch. We do that by convincing that engineer to become an advocate for us. And I'll hopefully make that a bit more tangible for you here. So what does our community look like? This can be quite a vague description. If anyone knows something called the maker movement or the maker community, you probably have the right idea. If you have a geeky cousin, or if you are the geeky cousin, then you definitely have an idea of who this community is. It's artists, designers, engineers, teachers, and students who all want to make things. They do things that are funny and trivial, like light up clothing for their dogs. They do things that are a bit more exciting, like interactive books and posters. But they do really sophisticated things as well, like using the materials to shield in X-ray and radioactive experiments. It's really incredible, the range of outputs that we've seen from the community. And as I said, the best part about it is the way in which they connect to us and our open approach. We think that there are three pillars to that approach, which is communication, information, and accessibility. So if you thought that electrically conductive inks or paints might solve some specific problem, you could call DuPont or Henkel, but unless you had an existing scaled and profitable application, it's somewhat unlikely you would get much attention from them. And I say that because we've tried to get attention from them, and they don't respond. And it makes sense because their business is built on finding existing profitable applications and scaling them. But we think the best way to find value in this technology is to act like humans and pick up the phone and respond to emails and be extremely communicative with everyone who calls us, because we don't know what's coming down the pipe. The other side of that is providing really good information that meets the technical standard that's set by the industry, but is also accessible to everyone that wants to look at it. And so accessibility is the thing that kind of forms an umbrella over these two. So this is our Zendesk interface from yesterday. So Zendesk is a software program that compiles all of your different communication feeds into one single interface. So this is our general email address and our messages on Facebook. Yesterday morning, when I screenshotted this, we had 23 tickets, and we had a response time of just under 24 hours, which is pretty good, but we like to do it a bit faster than that. We like to be even more responsive. The reason I show this is that as a technology company, if you can get people emailing ideas to you, you are in a very good position. You have to respond to them really quickly, and there's no way to do this other than to just respond, right? There's no way to automate this process. You have to genuinely engage with every user and every weird question that they have. Then you have to give them the right information. I'm sure that everyone was hoping that they would be subjected to technical data sheets this morning. These are 2 technical data sheets that we release. They are probably the most contentious piece of information that we produce in the office. And the reason that they're contentious is because we have to use language and standards that are set by an industry, but we also have to make it readable to anyone that might want to read it. So the challenge is getting an electrical engineer to look at this data sheet and take the technology seriously, but then to have a teacher or a student to look at it and understand the meaning behind the technical words present in the document. And that's really the core of our work with the community. And in fact, I had an engineer who told me that our technical data sheet was the only technical data sheet she has ever enjoyed reading. And I think that that was a very successful moment for us. So then the last bit, which kind of transitions into the future of the company, is this idea of accessibility. We have about 250 projects on the site. So if you buy a pot of paint, you can go on the site and find 250 different things to do with it. And they range from very technical to kind of goofy. This project is about making a sensor with the paint. So I'll show you more about the sensors in a second, but for a moment, what's important to understand is that this is a project that introduces this concept to a huge range of people. And the reason I show it is that it got viewed, and still gets viewed, about 10 times more than any of our other content. And the reason it's so successful, we think, is that each one of those viewers seems to think it's their own. We have electrical engineers who seem to think that it's written for them when they write in and ask questions or call us, and we have teachers who also seem to think it's for them. And the effort in this is to develop a language and a presentation of the content that speaks to everyone as if it was designed exactly for them. This also showed us that making the paint into a sensor was an incredibly compelling idea. So to put you in the mind frame that I have about the business, I think we're basically 3M plus the App Store. So we have this electrically conductive paint technology, and I'll talk to you more about our technology stack in a second. But then what we want is we want people to develop their own value on top of it. So if I could be any company today, I would be 3M. It's incredible what they do. I'm sure all of us have used Post-it notes in the last week, but I'm sure also all of us have flown in an aircraft that has 3M adhesives in it. They take fundamental material innovation and they deliver value to a range of customers. But what they have never done very well is opened up their innovation to a wide audience. And of course, that's what Apple did. Apple created the App Store and allowed anyone to create value on their hardware platform, and of course has delivered a huge amount of value because of that. So we think a combination of these two approaches delivers something pretty powerful. The first time that we saw that this kind of approach could work was a project with a creative agency based in the UK. So in this image, you see a yellow postcard plugged into this black box. So that postcard is just a piece of paper. It's been printed with our paint. When she touches the play button, it plays a song. In fact, it plays a whole album. She can touch a different button and play a different track or change the volume. The exciting thing is that they made, I think, 6 different postcards. So the yellow postcard played the yellow album, and the blue postcard played the blue album. People loved it, and the press covered it as if the song was stored in the postcard. But of course, the song and all the information was stored inside of that black box. The really clever thing about this project was that it showed us that people loved the idea of an electronic interface that wasn't overtly electronic, but it also showed us that if we use the paint correctly, it can be so cheap to produce that you can give it away. So they gave away thousands and thousands of these postcards, and people absolutely loved them. The last thing that it showed us was that we couldn't just produce the paint. So I said in the beginning that we make paint, and we do still make a lot of paint, but the paint is a bit like a spool of copper wire. Without something to plug it into on either end, it's not super exciting. They built a box, and their box played music. We realized that we could build the hardware as well and make it and add value through the creation of that hardware. So to start at the bottom of the technology stack, as I said, we make paint. It can do something simple, like it can light up this LED. So here we're using it kind of like a wire, but you can use it like a glue as well. You can also use it like a sensor. To use it like a sensor, you need this. So this is a simple piece of hardware. It's called the touchboard. On the image here, you see that it has 12 gold teeth on the top edge. Each one of those teeth is a sensor, and our community uses the paint to extend the sensing area off of that little tooth. So they literally sometimes will paint from that gold tooth off into the environment. They then can create essentially a button that can do lots of things. It can play a song, it can turn on the light, it can make something move, or it can stream data to a computer. You can basically do whatever you want with that button. When you put these things together, you then have a really powerful combination. So the paint plus the LED, it's not super exciting. But the paint plus the hardware becomes pretty compelling. And I'll show you probably the best video of that in a second. But I also want to point out that one of the challenges that we face as a company is present in this image. On the left, you have this weird material. It is a very strange material. On the right, you have something very traditional, a really well-established electronic product. The physical and mechanical connection between those two things is not straightforward at all. And in fact, it is probably the second most important area of research for us as a company. How do you connect weird, printed, flexible stuff to very traditional electronics? And without figuring that out, we'll never achieve the scale that we think we can achieve. So when you plug these things together, you get this. You get a very high-resolution sensor which can detect proximity or touch. So the setup is pretty straightforward. You have this pad of black paint in the front, and it's connected to the touchboard, and then the touchboard is connected to the computer. And you can see as this person's hand approaches it, it starts to detect them. And of course, when they touch it, the reading on the computer, that black bar, goes even higher. This is a really cool property. It is a type of sensing called capacitive sensing, which is not new. The touchscreen on your smartphone and actually the trackpad in the image on this laptop also use capacitive sensing. But we're doing it very differently by doing very large-scale, high-precision capacitive sensing. Afterwards, I know we're going to have a chance for a Q&A off the stage, and I'm going to be able to set up a physical demo, so please come over. I'd love to show you how this works in person. It's pretty cool. I can also show you how you can hide this sensor under other non-conductive objects. So imagine taking this pad and putting it under a piece of carpet. We could know where someone is in the room, how many people are in the room. We could put this into a wall and turn the entire wall into a light switch. It's a very powerful function. It's a function that the community has used really well, and essentially they've taken that technology stack, that's the kind of 3M part, and the first app that we saw was interactive retail spaces, I would say maybe even more interactive kind of multimedia retail spaces. So I want to show you a 1-minute video of a project that was built. We had nothing to do with it, and that's a really important point. This is people that have bought the materials on the site, use the technology to develop something of their own mind. So enjoy. So just in case it wasn't totally clear what was happening there, all of the black imagery that you see on the wall is our paint. And behind the wall is the hardware that then drives the projectors that we're turning on the lights and also drives the sound. So the paint is literally part of the wall, and the wall becomes this giant interactive interface. It's a really fun and kind of funny, engaging display, but what it showed us is that you can use the paint to turn the wall into an interactive or intelligent surface very, very intimately. So even though they did something that was kind of goofy, what we saw was something really serious. We can integrate into architecture. Obviously, there's a few very serious problems here, which is how do you scale this? This project, like the postcard project I showed you before, are literally created by hand. They're incredibly laborious, and they certainly wouldn't scale at all. So the question is, how do you take this technology and make it scale? Well, it's probably not a big surprise to anyone that the way we do that is with printing. So on the left, you have a jar of paint. You can spray it or paint it by hand. But on the right, you have a really high precision print. So I've also got a print up here with me, and I can show you some later as well. The important thing about printing is that as a process, it offers us two things, precision and scale. So the precision is really important for us. When we paint a pad of paint, we're generating an electromagnetic field. And that field shape is derivative of the shape that we paint. So if we paint a square, then the little field we make is like a square. If we paint a long, skinny line, then the field is long and skinny. We can detect things as small as an insect to the size of a person to large bodies of liquid through our sensing technique. The shape of what we print totally determines the performance of the sensor. So we have to have a lot of precision, or at least we can add value when we had precision through the sensing platform. The cool thing about printing is that it's very, very precise, and it's really scalable, and it's really cheap. This is a machine that makes newspapers at about 1,500 meters per minute. We think it should be making electronics at about 1,500 meters per minute. It is probably the oldest scaled manufacturing process that we have, and because of that, it benefits from an unbelievable economy of scale. In fact, it benefits from an economy of scale that is not present with traditional electronics. So the rise of consumer electronics in the last 30 years makes us feel like as long as you buy more widgets, eventually they will be free. For electronics, that is definitely not true. They hit a floor very quickly, and they don't get any cheaper. But in fact, with printing, you hit that floor much, much later. Printing continues to get cheap even after 10 million units. And what we find compelling about that is it means that we can print and create electronics at a huge scale. And this is where I think it's really interesting that I'm here at ULI, because that allows us to start to embed intelligence into the environment. So here you have a printed pad connected to a circuit board. Stay with me here because it's a little bit technical, but it's the most important thing to understand. The portion on the left is the cheap part, and the portion on the right is the expensive part. The portion on the left also determines how far away the sensor works from and what the sensor can sense. We can make that really big, but it doesn't really increase the cost at all. And that allows us to do an optimization that you normally don't have access to when you're thinking about smart buildings and smart architecture. If we had a retail store and we really cared about looking at one kiosk or island, and we wanted to see what are customers looking at, how much time are they spending in front of this kiosk, how many customers are there, we could definitely use a camera. But we'd have to use that camera quite close. And that would reduce the coverage area, because the closer the camera is, the less it can see in a broad sense and the more detail you get. To cover the whole store at that level of resolution, we'd need a lot of cameras. The benefit to our technology is that we're able to print sensors and increase their size without increasing their cost or compromising the resolution. So that sounds like very technical, but the point of it is it allows us to cover entire spaces with sensors. So if you remember back to the video where I showed someone's hand hovering over the printed pad, that technique combined with this kind of cost advantage that we have, means that we're able to embed sensors underneath the floor and behind the wall to start to understand people's use of space. So we might be interested in just optimizing the space for energy efficiency and understanding where people are over time. We might be interested in detecting a fall or detecting the events that might lead up to a fall in an elderly care situation. We might just be interested in doing something exciting like turning the entire wall into a light switch. We can create that wide area coverage because of the cost, and we're able to technically do it because of the nature of the physics that we use to make the sensors work. But in fact, we want to go one step beyond that, and the most exciting thing we can do is not to retrofit the sensors as stickers into spaces, but actually to apply the sensing technology at the point of manufacture into common building materials. So if anybody has ever had the luck of being able to see the way sheetrock or plywood is made, it's pretty amazing. It's very similar to a printing process. That lamination process affords us to include the technology at the point of manufacture, and it's at a cost where that is feasible to do. So that technology stack, the ability to incorporate into building materials themselves, is the most exciting thing that we do with this very humble material. The apps that people are building on top of it are getting really exciting. Right now, we're working with large corporations to take that technology stack and help them build apps that allow them to build smart home products that are creating spaces which are inherently intelligent. And that's where the company is going. We're using a community to go from what looks like a playful and trivial material to very large, scalable smart home, smart architecture, and smart building projects. We think if we do that correctly, we will be able to provide intelligence to every surface in every space at a cost that is feasible, which means that we're going to create an embedded architectural intelligence. And the biggest dream that we have is that we will start creating smart buildings as we build them, rather than retrofitting dumb buildings with smart technology. So that's it. Thank you very much for your kind attention.